I let my cheating wife plan her new life with her lover, then destroyed both their careers. The morning I found the receipts was supposed to be ordinary, just like every other Tuesday in our suburban home. I was looking for our tax documents when I stumbled across hotel bills, restaurant charges, and gift purchases that didn't match any of our shared memories. My hands trembled as I realized these weren't mistakes or forgotten expenses. They were evidence of a life my wife had been building without me. For 3 weeks, I watched her carefully, noting every late meeting, every sudden phone call that sent her rushing to another room, every excuse about working overtime. The woman I'd shared 15 years with had become a stranger who smiled at me while planning her escape. Her behavior patterns shifted so dramatically that I started questioning whether I'd ever really known her at all. The discovery came when she left her laptop open while showering. Her email was right there, filled with messages that made my stomach drop. She wasn't just having an affair, she was methodically planning to leave me for someone she worked with, someone who apparently shared her vision of a future that didn't include me. The messages revealed intimate details about their relationship, their plans to move across the country together, and worst of all, how they laughed about keeping me in the dark. Instead of confronting her immediately, something cold and calculating took over my thinking. I realized she was still months away from making her move, still gathering resources and making arrangements. This gave me time to prepare, but more importantly, it gave me time to understand exactly what I was dealing with. I started documenting everything while maintaining the facade of our normal marriage. What struck me most was how elaborate their planning had become. They'd researched apartments in different cities, discussed timeline strategies, and even calculated how much money she could take from our joint accounts without raising suspicion. Reading through months of their correspondence felt like discovering a parallel universe, where my marriage was just an inconvenience to be managed rather than a relationship worth preserving. The emotional impact hit me in waves throughout those weeks. Some days I felt numbly detached, going through the motions of our routine while internally processing the betrayal. Other days, rage consumed me so completely that I had to excuse myself from rooms to avoid saying something that would reveal my knowledge. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal when she'd come home and tell me about her day, knowing that most of what she shared was fabricated. I started investigating both of them more thoroughly, using resources I'd never thought I'd need. Her affair partner worked at the same company, though in a different department. They'd been careful about their professional interactions, but not careful enough. I discovered they'd been using company resources for personal communications, meeting in company facilities after hours, and even taking business trips together that weren't entirely legitimate. The turning point came when I found evidence that they'd been manipulating project assignments to work together more frequently. She'd been using her position to create opportunities for them to collaborate, essentially stealing time and resources from our household income to fund their relationship. This wasn't just personal betrayal anymore. It was professional misconduct that affected both their careers and our financial stability. I spent 2 months building a comprehensive case against both of them. Every email, every falsified expense report, every inappropriate use of company time was documented with timestamps and evidence. I discovered they'd been violating multiple company policies, from conflicts of interest to misuse of corporate resources. My technical background helped me understand exactly how to present this information in ways that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. The breakthrough came when I realized they'd been planning to use confidential company information to start their own competing business. Messages between them revealed they'd been copying client lists, downloading proprietary software, and planning to poach key employees. This wasn't just an affair anymore. It was corporate espionage that could destroy both their careers and potentially result in legal consequences. During this time, I maintained perfect normalcy at home. I cooked dinner, asked about her day, and even helped her shop for new clothes that I now knew she was buying to impress someone else. The cognitive dissonance was exhausting, but it also gave me clarity about what needed to happen. She'd made her choice to deceive me, and I'd made mine to ensure there were consequences. The final piece of evidence came when they started planning their exit strategy. They decided to give their 2 weeks' notice simultaneously, claiming they'd found better opportunities elsewhere. The reality was they were planning to start their competing business using stolen company resources and client relationships. This level of planning showed they'd been thinking about this for over a year, making every day of our marriage during that time a complete lie. I decided to act on a Friday afternoon, timing everything for maximum impact. I'd prepared separate packets of evidence for her supervisor, his supervisor, and the company's legal department. Each packet contained detailed documentation of their policy violations, evidence of their plan to steal company resources, and proof of their inappropriate relationship affecting workplace dynamics. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. Screenshots of their messages discussing client information, copies of files they'd illegally downloaded, records of their after-hours facility access, and documentation of falsified expense reports. I'd organized everything chronologically to show the progression from simple workplace affair to elaborate corporate theft scheme. I submitted everything through the company's anonymous reporting system, ensuring they couldn't trace the complaint back to me initially. The investigation would reveal the source eventually, but by then the damage would be done. I also sent copies to the appropriate regulatory bodies, since their planned business venture involved potential violations of non-compete agreements and intellectual property theft. The results exceeded my expectations. By Monday morning, both of them were called into separate meetings with human resources and legal counsel. Their computers were seized, their access to company systems was revoked, and they were placed on administrative leave pending investigation. The company took corporate theft very seriously, especially when it involved proprietary information and client relationships. Her reaction that evening was everything I'd anticipated and more. She came home in a state of panic, trying to explain that there had been some misunderstanding at work, that someone had made false accusations against her and her colleague. She had no idea I was the source of the complaint, and watching her fumble for explanations while I expressed sympathetic concern was both satisfying and disturbing. The investigation moved quickly because the evidence was so comprehensive. Within a week, both of them were terminated for cause, meaning they lost not only their jobs but also their severance packages, stock options, and benefits. The company also initiated legal proceedings to recover damages and enforce their non-compete agreements, effectively preventing them from starting their planned business venture. The personal fallout was immediate and devastating for both of them. Her colleague's family found out about the affair when the company investigation revealed the extent of their relationship. His spouse filed for divorce and took steps to protect their shared assets, leaving him with limited financial resources. Meanwhile, my wife found herself unemployed, under legal scrutiny, and facing the collapse of all her carefully laid plans. I watched her world crumble while maintaining my supportive husband facade. She had no idea that I knew about the affair, so she couldn't understand why everything was falling apart simultaneously. The stress of losing her job, facing legal consequences, and dealing with the end of her affair relationship was overwhelming her completely. The legal implications continued expanding as the company's investigation revealed more violations. They'd been stealing client information for over 18 months, planning their competing business for nearly a year, and using company resources for personal gain throughout their relationship. What started as workplace misconduct had evolved into potential criminal charges for corporate espionage and theft of intellectual property. Her affair partner began trying to contact her through various channels, but she was afraid to respond because she knew their communications were being monitored. This isolation added another layer of stress to her situation, as she couldn't even seek support from the person she'd planned to build a new life with. Their grand romance was collapsing under the weight of real-world consequences. Meanwhile, I started preparing for the next phase of my plan. I'd consulted with a divorce attorney and had begun organizing our financial documents. I wanted to ensure that when I finally revealed my knowledge of the affair, I'd be in the strongest possible position to protect my interests. The fact that she'd lost her job due to misconduct would significantly impact any potential alimony calculations. The irony wasn't lost on me that she'd spent months planning to leave me, only to find herself in a position where she'd need my support to survive the consequences of her actions. Her careful financial planning had assumed she'd have continued income from her career, but now she was facing unemployment, legal bills, and the loss of her professional reputation. 3 weeks after the investigation began, I finally decided to reveal what I knew. I chose a quiet Sunday morning, presenting her with printed copies of some of her messages to her affair partner. I didn't need to say much, the evidence spoke for itself. Her face went through a range of emotions from shock to denial to resignation, as she realized I'd known everything for months. Her first instinct was to blame me for destroying her career and her relationship. She accused me of being vindictive and cruel, of going too far in my revenge. But as we talked, it became clear that she understood the gravity of what she'd done professionally. The affair was one thing, but the corporate theft and planning to compete against her employer was entirely different. The conversation revealed layers of justification she'd built up over the months. She'd convinced herself that the company owed her more opportunities, that taking client information was just leveraging her professional relationships, that their plan to start a competing business was entrepreneurial rather than theft. The reality of facing actual consequences had shattered these rationalizations completely. Her affair partner was dealing with his own crisis, as his spouse had frozen their joint accounts and filed for divorce. He was facing the loss of his home, his children, and his financial security, all while dealing with potential criminal charges. The romantic adventure they'd planned had become a nightmare of legal and personal consequences that neither of them had anticipated. The company's legal team was thorough in their pursuit of damages. They'd calculated the value of stolen information, the cost of investigating the theft, and the potential revenue loss from the planned competing business. The financial liability was substantial enough to impact both their personal finances for years to come, even if they managed to avoid criminal charges. I found myself in the strange position of being the only stable element in her life, after systematically destroying everything else. She had nowhere to go, no income, and mounting legal bills. The person she'd planned to build a new life with was dealing with his own catastrophic situation and couldn't provide the support she needed. The divorce proceedings were surprisingly straightforward given the circumstances. Her misconduct, job loss, and financial liability significantly simplified the asset division process. I was able to retain most of our shared property and investments while avoiding any alimony obligations. The prenuptial agreement we'd signed 15 years earlier had clauses about adultery that worked in my favor. Watching her deal with the consequences of her choices was both satisfying and occasionally heartbreaking. This was someone I'd loved for 15 years, someone who'd shared my dreams and plans for the future. Seeing her reduced to desperation and regret was the justice I'd sought, but it also marked the definitive end of everything we'd built together. The professional consequences continued rippling through their industry. Word spread quickly about their corporate theft and the legal proceedings, making it difficult for either of them to find new employment. Their reputations were permanently damaged, and the non-compete agreements prevented them from working in their areas of expertise for several years. 6 months after everything began, I found myself living alone in our house, financially stable and emotionally exhausted. The satisfaction of successfully destroying their plans had faded into a kind of hollow victory. I'd protected myself and ensured they faced consequences, but I'd also lost my marriage and my faith in the person I'd trusted most. The final twist came when I learned that her affair partner had been manipulating her from the beginning. Investigation revealed he'd been planning to leave his own spouse regardless of her situation, and he'd been using her access to company information to advance his own career goals. She'd been as much a victim of his manipulation as I'd been of her betrayal. This revelation didn't change what she'd done or the choices she'd made, but it added another layer of tragedy to the entire situation. She destroyed our marriage and her career for someone who'd been using her for his own purposes. The future she'd planned with him had been built on lies just as elaborate as the ones she'd told me. Looking back, I realized that my methodical approach to revenge was both my greatest strength and my most significant weakness in this situation. I'd successfully protected myself and ensured they faced consequences, but I'd also spent months living a lie that was almost as elaborate as theirs. The emotional cost of maintaining that deception while planning their destruction had changed me in ways I was still discovering. The legal proceedings dragged on for over a year, with both of them eventually pleading guilty to reduced charges to avoid prison time. They were ordered to pay substantial restitution to the company and faced years of financial hardship. Their planned new life together never materialized, as the stress and consequences of their actions destroyed their relationship as thoroughly as it had destroyed their careers. In the end, I achieved everything I'd set out to accomplish. Their affair was exposed, their careers were ruined, their financial plans were destroyed, and their relationship couldn't survive the consequences of their actions. But victory felt different than I'd imagined it would during those months of careful planning and documentation. The house felt empty without her presence, despite all the anger and betrayal. 15 years of shared life couldn't be erased by revenge, no matter how justified or thoroughly executed. I'd won the battle completely, but the war had cost me everything I'd originally been fighting to protect.